Well, if Trump and Zelensky fail to align on Ukraine, the Trump has made it quite clear that the war between Russia and Ukraine is a European matter. The Americans have contributed a lot to it, but it's not their immediate national interest. Their immediate national interest are their borders, and what's happening in particular in the southern border, and Southeast Asia, the relationship that there is with China in particular. And you look at everything that is going on, it's Trump's economic relationship with China, and that battle that's going on. So America tries to stay the world's number one global economy. China's trying to take over that. That's where US is going to focus. And Europe is going to have to step up with its military support for Ukraine. Europe, for too many years, has been relying on the United States to provide it that backstop of security, and an awful lot more. And we're going to see European nations having to spend more and more on defence, and their home defence industries, which is no bad thing. That will help underpin a lot of their economic growths. But the different governments around Europe have avoided this for so many years. It's causing real political difficulties. And we've got a new German government starting to be formed. We don't quite know how that coalition is going to work out. We've got the French government, which is in a position where it's very difficult to make decisions at the moment. Francois Macron's got his views, but his governments have been collapsing, and he can't hold another general election for, I think, another 8 months or so, to try and solve that. And then the smaller countries around Europe are staying relatively quiet. So Europe is not in a good position at the moment. I think the tensions between Russia, Ukraine, and the West are going to grow. That I don't think Russia is going to push that into growing the conflict outside the borders of Ukraine, and I don't think Ukraine can force Russia to do that. But what Russia will try and do is deflect, and therefore, it's got a good partnership with Iran. We know Iran's influence across the instability that there is in the Middle East. Russia will try and do as much as it can to stimulate the international community having to focus on that. It's been very successful since the 7th of October massacre in Israel a couple of years ago, in helping with that deflection. He will try and push China to deflect. And if he could get Xi Jinping to militarily attack Taiwan, that would play into Putin's hands enormously. He will get Kim Jong-un and North Korea to threaten more with missile tests and possibly nuclear tests. I can't see there being a direct threat, but there is always the potential for the conflict to escalate and for the different areas of tension around the world to start to grow together. If they grow together, then we're in the scenario where there could be a global conflict. And if Xi Jinping thinks that Putin is going to be allowed to keep any territory inside Ukraine in a peace settlement, he may decide that now is the time to take Taiwan by force. And he's already said he's willing to do that. If he does that, we will see this Southeast Asian pivot. We will see the economic shock that will put across the world, and that will be much bigger than the economic shock whenever Russia reinvaded Ukraine 3 years ago. And that will change the world order and could lead to a growing and global conflict. We're a little bit off that at the moment, but it's a possibility, and it's one where there are clear paths to that happening. Well, I interpret those comments. The only interpretation you can get is Donald Trump turning around to Vladimir Putin and saying, "You will accept this deal, and you will not do anything against it." Because if you look at Putin's history in complying with international agreements, he hasn't complied to any ever, and therefore, he hasn't got a good history, and we couldn't expect him to rely on anything else. And that, as a statement from Trump, is almost as good as a security backstop, because it has to be underpinned by a threat of the United States taking direct action. But we're in a very dangerous game here, very, very dangerous game. The first thing is what comes out of the Trump-Zelensky discussions today, and then the Zelensky-Europe discussions this weekend, that are coming up. That will have the reset. The UK, as it settles down to 2.5% of GDP on defence, how that actually turns into increasing our defence capability, and how quickly that's going to happen. And again, the same across Europe. The driver for that will be the formation of a new German government, and the new German chancellor. What he does to try and assist Ukraine, because he is, one of the largest. The Germany is one of the largest donors of military capability and money to Ukraine. And if he takes the gloves off and allows Ukraine to use longer range German produced weapon systems like the Taurus cruise missile that his predecessor failed to allow the Ukrainians to use, then that will send a very, very clear message to Vladimir Putin. I can see Putin getting extremely worried if Europe enables Ukraine to go further, faster, and with greater capability. So I think we're in for a very interesting year. I think we're not going to see a ceasefire, certainly in the first half or the first two-thirds of this year. We might see latter this year. And if the Ukrainians manage to get to a position to launch counteroffensives May, June, July time, I think that will put huge, huge pressure on the Russians. And we could even see a collapse in the Russian economy. There are too many uncertainties at the moment to, and that's the one thing there is at the moment when looking at everything, is that there are too many uncertainties. There are so many moving parts. It's very difficult to bring these together into a coherent picture, and you're always having to adjust what that picture is going to be all of the time. So I'm on one hand worried because I can see a path to global conflict. On the other hand, we're a long way off all of those bits joining together, but it could happen very quickly.